Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Shaykh.
I hope you're doing well, Sheikh. Hanif. Welcome everybody, inshallah, to Illuminations. We're discussing, inshallah, Quran reflection every single day in Ramadan. Today we're blessed, alhamdulillah, it finally got to happen. And the circumstances, unfortunately, are not the best of circumstances, but we still wanted to make light of some of the guidance that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us in light of some of the things that happen in the world. We know that the Quran is timeless, and we know that the Quran has guidance for every single situation and every single circumstance that we go through, in happiness and in sadness as well. Alhamdulillah, we have Sheikh Hanif Williams with me, and we always, alhamdulillah, we just share thoughts with each other. And we were discussing just generally to have a reflection on the story of Adam and Satan, the first supremacist races. In light of the events that have happened recently that we found out about, they've happened since February, and that is the murder and killing of brother Ahmaud Arbery, and the fact that this story keeps repeating and this keeps happening, and the side of truth will always stand, and the side of falsehood will always show its ugly face, and the bigotry and racism will always be there. And I think it was very poignant that during this month, the month of Quran, we reflect on how the Quran is a guidance for all of us. And inshallah ta'ala, what I'll do is I'm going to read the portion of the Quran, inshallah ta'ala, that we're going to be discussing. I'll have it up on the screen share as well. And what we can do is then reflect on some of the points that mention the story and what we can get out of it, inshallah. I'll ask Sheikh Hanif to share his thoughts, inshallah. This is all from chapter 38, verse 71 on down in the Quran. And this chapter is known as Surah Sad. And I'll put it up, inshallah, so we can see it. And we will discuss it, inshallah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after saying, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem, we seek refuge from the Satan accursed. He says, وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي خَالِقٌ بَشَرًا مِّن طِينٍ فَإِذَا سَوَّيْتُهُ وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِن رُّوحِي فَقَعُوا لَهُ سَاجِدِينَ فَسَجَدَ الْمَلَائِكَةُ كُلُّهُمْ أَجْمَعُونَ إِلَّا إِبْلِيسَ اسْتَكْبَرَ وَكَانَ مِنَ الْكَافِرِينَ قال يا إبليس ما منعك أن تسجد لما خلقت بيدي أستكبرت أم كنت من العالين قال أنا خير منه خلقتني من نار وخلقته من طين قال فاخرج منها فإنك رجيم وإن عليك لعنتي إلى يوم الدين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in these verses, chapter 38, verse 71 on down, remember, O Prophet, when your Lord said to the angels, I'm going to create a human being from clay. So when I fashioned him and had a spirit of my own creation breathed into him, fall down in prostration to him is what Allah commanded, God commanded. So the angels all prostrated and everyone in the heavens all prostrated together, except Satan, Iblis, who acted arrogantly, becoming unfaithful. Allah asked, O Satan, Iblis, what prevented you from prostrating to what I created with my own hands, meaning Adam? Did you just become proud and arrogant, or have you always been arrogant and boastful? He replied, I am better than he is. You created me from fire, and you created him from clay. Allah commanded, then get out of paradise, for you are truly cursed. And surely upon you is my condemnation until the day of judgment. These are the verses that Allah speaks about, the moment where Satan was cursed forever because of this moment of arrogance. Allah Sheikh Hanif Williams for joining to discuss, inshallah, these beautiful verses of how we can draw guidance from them in light of the events that have happened, that are coming to light now, even though it's been over a few months now. It happened in February. Maybe you can speak a little bit about the situation and then how it relates to these verses and the guidances we can draw from.
Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi taslim kathira. First, I want to make sure my sound's not echoing. Sheikh?
You're good.
Okay. First of all, I think that this was brilliant. And one of the things I want to mention to my viewers. When you come across people with the level of scholarship of Sheikh Ayub, they are able to take life and connect it back to the authentic text. And this is what makes people like Sheikh Ayub very brilliant. He's able to take the situation that we have here and even bring me myself back to these ayats. And when he sent me this, I told the Sheikh that, you know, this is brilliant that you even thought of this. Like, and he even brought me back because the Quran kind of like it kind of like structures our emotions. One of the really unique things about these ayats and Surah Al-Sad, very, very unique, is that this idea of white privilege, right, is or just supremacy, and it's not only white privilege because you have other people who think that they're supreme above everyone else. This is the psychology of white privilege, of what we're seeing. The idea that I think that I'm better than somebody simply because of how I look. Like, this person is lighter than me, and I'm darker, or this person is darker than me, then I'm lighter. And that was basically the foundation that that Iblis or Shaitan, he actually stood on. He actually stood on this. That was the foundation. Ana khayrun minhum. You know what I mean? I am better than him. Like, that's the, like, you think that you're better than somebody. So when you think that you're better than somebody, what it does is that it places that person beneath you. You know, and then therefore they're not your equal anymore. And also what Allah Azza wa Jalla mentions in the ayats, he says the word arrogant is used here. You know, coming from the word kibr, as you know. And this word kibr is like this absolute pride and arrogance, and that keeps the individual from worshiping Allah Azza wa Jalla. That keeps the individual from seeing the humanity in somebody. You know what I mean? If you're arrogant, and when you see every single white supremacist that we see, they have this arrogant about us. They have this aura about us. Like, listen, even now that we're dealing with the protests here in the States here now, people just want haircuts. And you know, what we want is more important than lives at stake. And we will even sacrifice our pursuit of satisfying our own ego, even if it means putting people's lives at danger. You know, and this is actually what Shaitan did. And what Shaitan did in these ayahs that you read so beautifully is that Shaitan was very clear. He was very clear of blaming Allah. And sometimes we forget that. He said, it was you who created me on fire. You know what I mean? So with the people in the white supremacists, it's you jogging in my neighborhood.
Right.
Not thinking that he's a few blocks away in his own neighborhood. That's his neighborhood too. He can jog wherever he wants to jog. You know, it's Allah Azza wa Jalla can create whoever he wants to create. So they never place blame on himself, and this is actually the center and the foundation of narcissism. So that's the gist of what I wanted to mention in the very beginning. But I would love, you know, you are teaching sheikhs, and so I would love to hear what you have to say, Sheikh Hasib, as well.
To be fully honest with this story, when it broke out, was a very powerful shock. I mean, you know, I really appreciate what you posted, to be honest with you, about, you know, keeping your peace and some people not being comfortable to see those images in the video. I think that's a very powerful and beautiful message in light of, look, we're being bombarded with constant trauma to the face and to the eyes and to the mind, and just to pay respect to the deceased. Sometimes it's just too much for many people, among them myself. Like, it's just, you know, when you see somebody, an innocent person, being attacked in such a manner, you know, other than, you know, having respect for the person who's passed away already. It's been almost over 2 months now. I think that was a point that the shock to the system is already seeing that this is a modern day lynching in the age of 4K. You know, we're seeing fully HD videos of people being, you know, suppressed in such a manner. The first thing that came to my mind is literally this, and that's why I reached out to you and said, you know, I definitely wanted to hear your thoughts on it. One of the most powerful things about the story, let me just put it up for those people who may not know, just to give you a little bit of an overview. This is Ahmaud Arbery, who was just jogging in his street, in his own neighborhood, and he literally just was, as you know, a supremacist, racist bigot would want, have a sense of entitlement to stop any person on the road. This guy named George Michael and his son, they basically thought that this person who was an innocent individual, human being who was just trying to, do his own exercise. They have a right and entitlement to just stop anybody on the street and search. So out of their racism, they thought that this person was somehow a robber or somebody that was doing some kind of criminal activity that was in the neighborhood. So they went and stopped Ahmaud Arbery, and he had a full right in this idea of responding against the oppression and racism and supremacy. He stood his ground and said, you have no right, etc. And eventually, what happened is they came and they just shot this young man who was just jogging. You can see the newspapers where his attorneys speaking, and even like I think presidential candidates have even mentioned that his life matters, and they demanded an arrest when this video came out. And these two men are walking scot-free right now, and that is just to the idea and concept that our faith even teaches us that we speak for justice. When you save a life, you save as if you saved all of humanity. And if one life passes unjustly, it's as if all of humanity has passed unjustly. In light of everything that's going on, it was just a big shock. And then what I did is, I kind of personally reflected over some of my own experiences on my page when I said, if you lived in the South, you know the racist tone of entitlement and bigotry. When these faces, they come at you, and this has happened to any person of color, but more obviously for the Black narrative in America, where you have these people, they have a sense of entitlement like Shaitan did, like Satan, where, why is it that I don't have a response to myself, right? And this idea that they will come at you demanding a response. Why are you in the neighborhood? Where's your, justification? Prove yourself, and so on and so forth. And this kind of rhetoric is not new to anyone who lives, especially in areas where white supremacy is great. And in reality, all over America, the system of white supremacy is prevalent. So the ugly faces of hatred, I said, start with the inhumanity that people are beneath them. They actually look at you like you're beneath them, that you're not up to the standards that we are because of and you can see it in people's eyes and in the tone that they talk. In fact, one person to me, that he called me boy, and I can just imagine this is nothing. This is nothing compared to what African Americans face in America and since they were young. The idea of a systematic injustice that's present. And I can only imagine that kind of rhetoric and tone being used with Ahmaud Arbery because right before this tragic event happened. So I commented and said the valiant and defiant face of Ahmaud Arbery and the humiliated faces of bigotry, supremacy, and entitlement, George Gregor, and Travis McMichael. And I said, may God bring them to justice in his court in this life and the next. In reality, this situation is a very, very sad just replay of history. You have a being that thinks that, like you said, first of all, denying God, questioning God, saying, why did you create me from fire? Why did you create him from clay? I want you to discuss this idea of the first supremacist racist, that Satan was the first, you could say, supremacist. Satan was the first racist, the first one that actually thought because of what he was made of and what he was created of, he is better than another. Can you speak to us about that, inshallah?
Yeah, if you look at the ayat of that 76 ayat of Surah As-Sad, if you look at what he said and the last half, what Shaitan said, he said, basically, I'm created of fire and you created of clay. And even if you look at this from optics, fire is actually more dazzling to look at, like fireworks, and the color of fire is actually more dazzling to look at. So he was speaking about his beauty. Clay is just mud. It's like it's really nothing. I mean, it's not something really that your eyes can become amazed at, right? So he knew this, right? And so with white supremacy, the idea, even what they call in the former first lady, she looks like a monkey, and different things like that. So this is the same exact. And if people on Zoom, you can see the ayat that we're talking about. Yes, the 76 ayat. And you see actually what Shaitan said, and it's actually the way he said it too. It's actually like the way he said it. It's the first thing he says, "Ana khayrun minhum." He said, "Ana khayrun minhum." He said that I am better than him, and he says, "Khalaqtani." He said, you created. You know what I mean? Min nari, of fire. Khalaqtahu, you created him min of teen. So just how it's packed it like, okay, first I'm elevating myself over you, And then I'm telling you that, you know, it was a deficiency in your creation of it was a proficiency rather in your deficiency and your creation of me, and it was a deficiency in your creation of him. So in his eyesight, it's the insult to Allah Azza wa Jalla first, and then after that, it's what Allah created directly that he becomes the insult. Insult. He insults Allah. Anything that's being created, and this is why he's an open enemy. He made it clear. He made it clear from day one. I mean, some of the ulama, and you can follow me up on the Sheikh Ayub, saying that at this point, Sayyidina Adam, he may have not even been, life has not even been breathed into him. Never even got a chance. So then we go, I can't breathe, and the I can't breathe, you know, hashtag. You have Sayyidina Adam alayhi salatu wasalam. He hasn't even had the chance to breathe. You know what I mean? So you look at that. The other part,
an internal hatred before even a person has a chance to know who they are. I mean, this was even before Adam didn't even meet Iblis, but there's a hatred there prior to that even.
And that goes back to the systemic part, as that this is generated. You know, white supremacy is even though it's it can't be inherited obviously genetically, but it can be inherited culturally. Right. So you have the same inheritance. It's the same, you know, it's the same mindset. And so when you have with Shaitan being the first white supremacist, he is the prototype. They check off all of the things that he were in these ayats. And also the ayats in Surah Al-A'raf, the 24th to 25th to 26th ayat, you look in Surah Al-A'raf, but in this particular Surah Sa'd, you can see how Shaitan is navigating his way. And here's another thing that's really, really important. He's almost angry at something, and if you ask a white supremacist, you say, well, what are you so upset about?
Right.
Like what's making you so angry? And if you look, what does Shaitan have to be so angry about? Like he has a very lofty position at this point. I mean, does he feel threatened? I mean, it's just like, so these are the things with white supremacy as well too. And you see that them pursuing this young man, it's their privilege that pushing them to pursuing them, and they know that if they kill him, the idea that these people are free, they never ever went to even be, apprehended or anything. I mean, just to think about that, and it's this idea of no accountability. And the reason why Shaitan feels that he can speak freely like this to Allah Azza wa Jal is because there's no accountability that he's placed on himself.
100%. One of the most beautiful things I think you're mentioning is the sense of entitlement, right? And that breeds from arrogance. So, like you said, it's a cultural passé. So it's inherited from one generation to generation. If you see the language that's used in our time of this cultural, inheritance of racism and bigotry and supremacy, it literally is the language of this is our culture. Remember the idea of that the statues of people in the Civil War who represented propping up figures of racism and slavery. People will say that this is the culture that we have. So they will change the language of saying, rather than saying, hey, look, these things represent, they're symbols of oppression to millions of people, and the history of this country should not, celebrate that kind of oppression. They will say, what? This is who we are. This is our culture. This is the language that's used is justification of that supremacy and that entitlement, right? And that's why going to the root of it is to show that this in reality is a lack of humanity. It's a lack of common sense. And one of the things that you mentioned, that it breeds from arrogance, but one of the things that my grandfather helped me to realize, this is a very powerful example. He said, don't be stupid like Satan. And I said, what do you mean, Grandpa? He says, I want you to think about this. Which one is better, fire or clay? And I was like, I don't know. He's like, just tell me, which one do you think is better? I was like, oh, maybe fire. He says, what if I have a whole pile of dirt to throw it on your little fire there? What do you think will happen? The fire will go out. And he said, if you think clay is better, fire can make any dirt hard, right? It'll make it it'll change its state. So he said, the question is not which one is better. The answer is that neither is better than the other. And that's the stupidity of Satan. true ignorance to think that just because you're made up differently, you have a different background, you have a better education, socioeconomic class than anybody, or you think that you have privileges than others. These privileges therefore give you this notion that you are better than someone, you can stop someone, the entitlement of it. So the powerful of this whole thing is that it doesn't matter what you're made from. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, the entirety of this message that God sent a faith to humanity was what? It was what? Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. That the most noble of you in the sight of God are the most conscious of Him, right? In your relationships with others and in servitude to Allah. I'd love to hear from you on that.
You know, one of the things, first of all, your grandfather with that example was absolutely amazing, mashallah. One of the things that I really want to go back to is what you mentioned from the outset, and that would be, you know, viewing this violence and like you said, in 4K in real time, and the hyper visibility of seeing these incredible and horrific acts that are right there at our fingertips, and the type of psychological trauma it has on us. And I just want to make sure that everybody, if you don't want to watch it, you don't have to watch it. I mean, but if you're somebody that, you know, it doesn't bother you and you want to see it, I mean, it's fine. But I was telling people just to stay away from it. Number two is this shaitanic, these people are shaitans, you know what I mean? They are like almost his spiritual descendants, if you will. I mean, because they're going for, and you know, to take a life. I mean, I was telling, you know, my daughter said with something happened, one of the so-called terrorist attacks happened, and my daughter said to me, she said, you know, Baba, you know, we don't even kill spiders. We're scared to kill spiders. I mean, let alone. So just to take a life, I mean, just to step on an ant, it's like you got to say Bismillah, man. Unless the ant has to be, or the spider has to be around you, that's gonna, you know, maybe crawling on your baby or something. We go that believer goes that far length of not even harming an insect. So we can't even fathom, like, the believer's heart to soft. So many of the ummah has been reaching out to us and saying that, you know, this is just devastating. Like, somebody can actually take somebody's life. Did this actually really happen? Especially those people in distant lands that never been here in America, and seeing this idea of somebody's life being taken simply because in broad daylight. So you look at all of the things that are compounded that leads the individual to doing that. Like, it's not even hidden. Like, we're going to do this in broad daylight, and we're probably going to get away with it, because I live in a very well-off neighborhood here in North Carolina, and I see people jogging all the time and all throughout hours of the night. I see white people, I see Arabs, I see Desis, because it's a diverse community. I would never think that somebody looking inside of a window is going to be coming into my house. Like, what makes you think that? I mean, it has something to do with, again, why does Shaitan feel threatened just by the mere creation of Sayyidina Adam alayhi salatu wasalam? So that's a psychological issue that we have to do. And so moving forward with this and seeing that, and I love, again, Sheikh Ayub, I love the fact that you connected the ummah back to the text. Let's come back to the text. Let's not get, because this, you can kind of like go a little right or left with this. You can get into the emotions, especially as a black man or a black woman, and say, let's go back to the text. This is the month of the Quran. Let's go back. And it's great to have our scholars, and I want everybody to know it's great to have our scholars like Sheikh Hasib guide us back to the text.
No, bless you, man. One of the things that I want to just, honestly, I want to hear from you as well, because being, again, a black imam and a black father, I think a lot of Muslims, let me just be real with you, man. A lot of Muslims are separated from those two realities. And that's why I wanted to have you here, a person of knowledge, mashallah, who's from a family of knowledge. May Allah have mercy on your father and your family, and the good work that you all do. I wanted to hear from that perspective as well, so we can connect people to that experience. I mean, you mentioned a conversation that you had with your daughter. What was the conversation like on this, as an imam, as a Muslim, and as also a black Muslim in America, dealing with this much more than the realities that sometimes a lot of Muslims they're separated from, right? And the struggle also they're separated from as well. And it becomes very frustrating, because we celebrate people like Malcolm X, rahimahullah, and then at the same time, we don't understand the struggles that within our own communities we see elements of the satanic progeny, right? And the effects of it exist within Muslims as well. So I'd love for you to talk about those two concepts, inshallah. One of them is, your experience as well. What were your thoughts, your family's discussions, and then inshallah as your guidance to the community, inshallah, how to approach this.
Yeah, right. Well, first, I just have to continue to tell my communities, and my younger two daughters are not that much aware. 13, Rouhani, MJ's only 2, Marajana is only 2, Hania, she's 19 years old. She's really aware. I just told her, be careful. And I said, this is the world that we live in. And you really just can't really coach yourself through this. And not only that, I have also daughters, Hania and Rouhani, of course. They're also hijabis too. So there's they're amongst the muhajireen. So there's whole nother harshness that they have to deal with. Let me put this into context. You had Sheikh, who I love so much, Sheikh Abdul Nasir Jangda, Hafidullah on. So if Sheikh Abdul Nasir Jangda gets pulled over by a police and I get pulled over by a police,
right,
what's going through my mind and what's going through his mind are two totally different things. And I just want you, but at the same time, we're about the same age, but the flip side to that, and being a Muslim, if he goes to the airport and TSA pulls him aside, and I go to the airport and TSA pulls aside, what is going through his mind is different from what's going through my mind. Do you understand? So it's like this. So it's not just only black people. Now I want to be careful with that because we have people who take this, and I don't want to become a black nationalist with this because everyone has the different levels of it. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. As far as my reality, as far as being a black man before anything, and I want to say this to you, Sheikh Ayub, my family has had tremendous success, corporate success. Despite that corporate success, at the end of the day, I'm still a black man in America. I mean, and that, I don't know if people can really appreciate. It's not like, my father was the director of the surgery room. He was very, very, focused as far as being a scholar and put me on that path. And I just, at the end of the day, I'm still a black man. At the end of the day, my children are still black kids or girls wearing the hijab. And so when I walk out the door, I have to make sure that my seatbelt is fastened. I have to make sure there's no, like the other day, I was in my brother's truck and I'm in my brother's studio right now, the studio library. And I was traveling that night and I said, let me make sure that these blinkers work. Like I had to literally get out and just, because if I get stopped on the back road of North Carolina and my blinker is out and I got some guy who just, he didn't make the basketball team in high school.
Right.
And this is just his night. And he said, okay, we got one, boss. So these two realities intersect, not only for Hanif J. Williams, and also for Sheikh Hasib too, because if you come to America and when you're in America, you know how it is. Listen, we got to make sure that we walk in the fine line when I'm going through TSA. I got to make sure things is right. And so it's just really, really unfortunate. And I want to say this and being realistic. Sheikh Hasib, there's a part of me that's hopeful and there's a part of me that's also despondent too. Because when you see somebody get murdered in cold blood on camera, we are a religion, as you mentioned, of justice. To see that and to see the culprits walk away basically scotch-free with citizens' arrest. And a citizen's arrest happens normally when somebody's stealing a bike out of Walmart and people tackle them and they wait for the cops. This is and all a citizen's arrest. How does that wind up becoming a homicide? You know what I mean? So you look at, so I remain hopeful on one end, obviously because of the qadr of Allah.
Right.
But I also, what more has to be done for this to stop? I mean, every day here on social media, we see the police officers bothering black people or bothering people of color, right? and then but then on one hand they're handing out face masks to white people at at parks, and it's just like, I mean, okay, just are we the only ones that see this? I mean, it's like so my experience is one of anxiety, but fortunately, and I have to be transparent with everybody here. Fortunately, because of success, it has insulated my family some way because of the community we stay in. I'm kind of a little bit insulated from it, but of course I spend a lot of time in Crenshaw. I see those places, and police brutality is right. Matter of fact, my first night in Crenshaw, we were pulled over by the police, and my the security, I was fully dressed, and the police officer said, just before I handed my lights, I was in the driver's seat. He said, "Are you an imam?" And I said, "Yes, I'm just by way of just." He said, "Okay, just relax. We're not." So it was like 4 cops that came. He said, "Just relax. We want to make sure that he's good." And it was just like, I just said, "Alhamdulillah." Like, but it could have easily went like, I mean, we're in the middle of Crenshaw. We're coming from Nipsey Hussle's, all of the things that happened with him, and it's just like we got pulled over, and 4 cops came, and one of the young guys came and said, "Hey, you're an imam, can I see your license?" "Oh, okay, hey, how you doing?" I said, "I'm coming from in town, I'm teaching." He said, "Okay, we're going to be a few minutes," but that's how quick things can happen. So so the reality has me, I'm anxious, and I'm aware that other people that don't have this privilege, if you will, that I have, face more harsh realities.
I think that's a beautiful point, to be honest with you. I mean, hearing it from you, man, it's extra powerful, because this is, a black imam saying that he has privilege. To me, that's powerful, because if you have that sense of self-awareness, man, that's what Allah teaches us, that we all have to check our own different levels of privilege. And it's very sad to hear that, honestly. Like, it saddens me a lot that I have a brother that, you as a person in your family and your community is something that goes through this much more than Muslims understand it, just because they got stopped at TSA once in a while. Like, you can't compare those two things, right? There's no comparison whatsoever. Don't even try. But at the same time, when you see it, and I think amplifying these discussions more and more, and every time that it happens, that we speak about it, because I'll tell you something that's also transparent from our perspective. You see the level of racism that exists within our own community as well. The idea of listen to who the voices are that we turn to. And I'll just be fully honest with you. Muslims have this love of Orientalist colonized mindset as well, in the sense that you have, my all respects, if it's a white Orientalist non-Muslim academic tweeting something about Islam, you'll see this on front page on Time Magazine, Al Jazeera, and whatever. You know what I'm saying? So when it comes to our own level of where we're at, we're also colonized in our mindsets, and sometimes internalizing these systems of injustice and systematic, you could say, supremacy and privilege. And I think that needs to be checked as well, in the sense that a lot of us, we don't understand how much we may have a sense of inferiority in the colonized mindset that we came with. Because remember, the immigrant community came from a community of colonization. That's what we left. So three generations where we came from, we were colonized. So unfortunately, some of those things, some of that colonization trauma has still left remnants within our own selves, where we look up to, unfortunately, the next white non-Muslim who's telling us how great Islam is and makes us feel better. Like, you've seen this probably, these shows that come on and people talk about representation in the media, right? The notion that where is proper representation? Why do we want it so much, to be honest with you? Yes, minority communities deserve to be represented properly. That's 100% true. But my question is, why do we seek that, right? Because you see the power of the press and the media and the entertainment industry as somehow being responsible to represent your faith properly. You know what I'm saying? Why don't we live as Muslims the way we should be, instead of trying to seek appeasement from others, trying to seek to fit in, trying to seek a sense of, validation? Why are we seeking the validation of others? And this is the idea of why these conversations need to happen more, because oftentimes, man, these things happen and we just say, you know what, another one, another statistic,
Yeah,
another person.
Yeah, and I think
And,
that
go ahead.
No, Tafadhal, ya Sheikh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
One of the things I want to say before iftar here, I got my family getting a little antsy downstairs. So one of the things that I will say really quick before we sign off is that, and I love the fact that with me, even if you look at some of my posts, I'm going to go hard, but I always pull back because I don't want to be controlled by my emotions, because you can get you can lose yourself, especially during the month of Ramadan. And I'm here to tell you, and I'm saying this straightforward, I love what the A'imma, including yourself, Sheikh Hasib, what you're doing with the Quranic inspiration. I never would have thought that this Ramadan, we would be so connected this Ramadan. I never would have thought that. So I'm mentioning that to say, I don't want to go too hard when it comes to these things, because this has been one of my top 3 best Ramadans. I mean, personally.
Yeah.
But just to see so much, like I was seeing you with Sheikh Abdul Nasir Jangda and seeing you with, all of the different A'imma that you have on there. And so you want to be really careful that people don't also, this doesn't shift your Ramadan, where you become angry. And if you're going to become angry, you got a few hours, get it back together, break your fast. You still got a qiyam you have to do. Read a little bit about it, because this is going to be a process. Follow Sean King, who's he's like the imam of this stuff. I mean, so follow him. I mean, see what he got going on. But I really wanted to basically take a step back and say, okay, let's give it a few posts. Let's talk about it. And let's kind of get back to our, ibadat. But we could talk about this too. But if we're going to talk about it in the manner that you're talking about it, Sheikh Hasib. And I wanted to say that I do, like I said, I unfortunately have to cut you short, Sheikh, because, iftar is right here in our rise, and the kids are banging on the door and acting crazy. So.
I really appreciate your time, Sheikh Hanif. May Allah bless you and your family. Protect us all, inshallah. I hope we can talk more and discuss this issue much more and seek your guidance, especially from somebody who's an imam and deals with the youth as well as the community. And may Allah bless and accept from all of you, inshallah, and inshallah give us an opportunity to see each other again in the blessed city. And see you soon, inshallah. May Allah bless you. Assalamu alaikum.
I appreciate you. And we want to give salams to everybody on live. I know you guys come in here and say assalam. We can't see you, but we give salams and our taslim to everybody. And we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to protect us, make dua for us, please, and make dua for our beloved Sheikh Hasib. If you don't follow him, some of my followers, please. I mean, by now you see me always have him. It's Hasib MN at Hasib MN. So do that. And also donate to the legacy if you can. Inshallah, this is the month of generosity.
Jazakallah khair. May Allah bless you. We'll see you soon, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Yes, inshallah. Wa alaikum assalam.